This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. That is Matthew 7:15. Guys, last week, I was all sad and mad whenever I came in the studio, but today I am like fired up, and it's not just because of the Jocko nootropics. It's because I'm really excited about what I'm going to talk about today, but I'm also very excited about what's going on in Jacksonville, Florida on October the 17th. That is the Church 1122 Men's Conference. The speakers will be Joby Martin, Willie Robertson, John Tyson, Brian Laritz, some other guys, and also yours truly. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for you, but we will all be there, and I'm telling you guys, I keep getting messages from dudes that have bought tickets that are planning to travel to Jacksonville for that. It will 100% sell out. Get your tickets now. It is in the show notes, or you can just Google Church of 1122 Men's Conference, October 17th and 18th of this year. Again, always, we are thankful to our donors. We can't do anything that we do without you guys. And please leave us a review and share with a friend if this is good for you. But I did want to make a couple of quick clarifying notes from episode 711 of last week. So first of all, I'm very mad at myself that I didn't make some sort of a 7-Eleven joke last week. It was perfect. It was right for the picking, and I just didn't do it. But as I was listening to it back, there were a few things that I was kind of imprecise about, and so I want to clear that up a little bit. So I was talking about Republican Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and how they need to be primaried because they did not vote to approve Pete Hegseth to be the new Secretary of Defense. And even though they had voted yes on Rachel Levine, a dude pretending to be a woman during the Biden administration. So I mentioned that Maine is essentially a purple state, which is true, but I also said that Alaska is essentially a purple state. I just kind of made it as an offhand comment, and as soon as I heard myself say that, I was like, wait a minute, that's not true at all, you dummy, which led me to actually look up the last time that Alaska voted for a Democrat for president, and the last time Alaska voted for a Democrat for president was in 1964. Okay, so 22 years before I was born, when incumbent President Lyndon B. Johnson won the state during his landslide victory over Republican Barry Goldwater. So my bad, Alaskans, please stop sending me messages. Also, I was talking about the death of former Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards and how she was compared basically to the most murderous dictators of the 20th century. So during her tenure at Planned Parenthood, she oversaw the slaughter of 4 million unborn babies. And there is a point that I thought I prepared to make, but I didn't make it while I was doing my commentary last week, so I want to make it now. So I was talking about how Cecile Richards is somewhere in the neighborhood of Hideki Tojo, Vladimir Lenin, Kim Il-sung, and Pol Pot in terms of the number of people that she had murdered, okay, or that she oversaw their murder. But here's the biggest point and the most fundamental difference between Cecile Richards and those other murderous humans. She oversaw the murder of human beings that had absolutely zero means of defending themselves. So in that way, her satanic impact on humanity is way different than even those evil dictators from the 20th century. Because again, even in Pol Pot's Cambodia or Lenin's Soviet Union or something like that, people at the very least could have done this. If you're watching on YouTube, which by the way, our Rumble has been disconnected for like a year and I didn't realize, sorry. So I'm going to try to figure that out. But if you're watching this on any of the video streaming platforms, they could at least put their hands up, right? And defend themselves. Not all these people were armed. Not all these people could defend themselves in the way that maybe some of us here in America are blessed enough to defend ourselves. But they were able to defend themselves somewhat, or they were able to try to run away. They were able to try to escape something, right? And most of them got in anyway. But Cecile Richards and Planned Parenthood, they're going after the most indefensible people, or the people that they can't defend themselves, like the most out of everybody. They're children inside the womb. They have no means to protect themselves. And Cecile Richards and all Planned Parenthood, they profited off of that, and Planned Parenthood continues to profit off of that. So I wanted to make that finer point. And also, this one's a weird one. But during my interview with Michael Walsh, he mentioned Camille Paglia, okay? And so she's an American academic, social critic, and all that. And I swear to goodness, like a year ago, I swore that I heard somewhere that she had passed away. And I remember being like, oh, that's kind of disappointing. I would have loved to have her on the show at some point, things like that. And so while he was talking, he mentioned Camille Paglia, and I said, may she rest in peace. You may not have heard it because I was talking underneath him talking. But she's definitely alive, guys. So again, if you ever look at me and you're like, gosh, that Kyle, he really has everything squared away and he never makes any mistakes. There's some mistakes. Sometimes I don't speak as clearly as I want to. And sometimes I think people are dead because I saw it online somewhere and they're actually alive. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into the quick hitters for today. And here's something I'm going to do different here right from the beginning. I'm going to do a quick hitter right now. So I normally read the list and then I do my main point and then we go. But I literally added this morning, and I've got to get it out of my system because it's so frustrating and it's like making my energy go all over the place. So the first quick hitter I'm going to hit, then we'll do our main thing, and then we'll get into the rest of the quick hitters. Illegal immigrants all over the United States of America protesting ICE and mass deportations, because this is happening like right now as I'm recording this, a couple of days before many of you are hearing this. So as you can see, we're in this new beautiful studio. Okay, so this is my new solo setup, right? And so I've got some more cameras over there for the forging table, so the forging table will look even doper here very, very soon. And so Landon Robertson, he came out here from Florida to do this. This is a guy that goes all over the country doing this type of thing. It was a great, great pleasure to have him here to do that. Now, he's a big chicken wing guy, and so am I. And the best chicken wing place in the Oklahoma City metro area, in my opinion, and I'm happy to hear recommendations, is a place called Chicken Beer on 23rd Street, okay? And so yesterday, we were working on the studio on Sunday afternoon and evening, and then Monday morning, we were getting a lot of stuff ready to go, but we're hungry. It's lunchtime. He's like, hey, let's hit that wing place. And I'm like, bet, let's go. That's exactly what I want to do. So we drive all the way there, and as I pull into the parking lot, I see no cars. It's like, that's odd, because it's like 12:30, 12:45, no cars. And then I look inside the windows of the restaurant, and there's no one in there. And I'm like, that's really strange. I'm like, hey, hop out real quick and go up to the door and see what's going on. And as he's doing that, I'm like looking at Google, and I'm like, okay, it shows that they're open on Mondays, because some places are randomly closed on Mondays, that they're open. He goes up to the door, knocks, no one's there, lights are completely off. They are closed, and it is in the middle of lunchtime on Monday. So he comes back to the car, and then he goes to their Facebook or Instagram, and he sees this post. Okay, this is Chicken Beer on Instagram. Closed today. Dear valued customers, we are closed today. We recognize and respect the decisions of those in our industry who have chosen to stand in solidarity. As the children of parents who fled Vietnam during the war, we understand firsthand the sacrifices and difficult choices families make in pursuit of a better life. We appreciate your understanding and look forward to serving you again tomorrow. And I immediately, because at this point I had been fasting since the previous afternoon, I have a little mini head explosion at how absolutely stupid this post is and this decision. And then I find out that there are restaurants in different places all over the metro of Oklahoma City and all over the country that were standing in solidarity on Monday and choosing not to come to work. Okay, so getting a free day off for most of these people, okay? But the thing is about these people, specifically restaurant people that shut down on Monday of this week, they are completely full of crap. And this is why. They shut down in solidarity on their least busy day of the week. Because at the end, this is a game of capitalism, right? This is basic economics. They're sacrificing Monday, which if you've ever been in the restaurant world, you know that Monday is the least trafficked day in basically the entire country when it comes to restaurants. And so they sacrifice that. But if they really wanted to virtue signal, why didn't they sacrifice Friday and Saturday and Sunday? Any of those days, the days that are the busiest for restaurants, if they actually meant it. Because the thing is that they don't actually mean it. They don't mean it at all. So they wanted the least amount of flesh, right, to be sacrificed on that day. But why not give up your tips and all of your extra capital on Friday and Saturday? So as you guys look forward to this weekend, I want you to take note of all the restaurants that are closed in solidarity, but also these people in this post, they're comparing people that fled Vietnam during the Vietnam War, right, to illegal immigrants that are currently in this country that are deciding, some of them, to go back to their country before they're deported. Please explain to me how these things are the same. Please explain this to me. Explain it to me like I'm 5. But the bigger point here is you can look at videos and pictures all over online right now of people flying the flags of their home country, be that Mexico or Venezuela or Chile or, Colombia, whatever, right? They're flying the flags of their home country while they're stomping on and or burning the flag of the United States of America. So I made this point on Instagram. So you're protesting against the United States of America while waving the flag of your home country, which is such an awful place to live that you choose to live in the United States of America. Got it. Makes total sense. But what we're seeing here, guys, again, a lot of these people that are in these protests, they are illegal immigrants, okay? So they are taking advantage of and benefiting and profiting off of the United States of America, specifically the U.S. taxpayer, myself and most of you listening to this. They're profiting off of that without a single solitary shred of gratitude. Now, I have a gratitude list on my phone. It was a great suggestion by Joby to, hey, let's have a gratitude list on our phone, at least one thing for every year you've been alive, so that if you're ever like down in the dumps, you can look at that and realize, hey, I'm still living a great life. Living in America is something that I'm very grateful for. I never take that for granted. Like, here I am living in this great country. I was blessed enough to be born here. I didn't have to try to immigrate here. I didn't have to try to make life work somewhere else, but I'm very, very grateful. But these people, lived in squalor, maybe in warfare, in these corrupt environments, unsafe environments for them, their families, and their businesses, and they come here and they have absolutely no gratitude for this country. I made this point during the World Baseball Classic because, you had, Team Cuba and Team Venezuela and all these other different teams, and Team Mexico. And all these people were in the stadium in Miami flying the flag of the country they refuse to live in because it sucks so bad. They live here. They're Americans. I made the point of my brother-in-law and all of his friends that are here. They all were originally from Brazil, but they're here in America now. They are citizens here, and they're great citizens, by the way. But they only root for Brazil when it comes to sports or different things like that. And I get it. It's hard to root for, American soccer whenever you grew up watching Brazilian soccer and that team, right? But it's can you show some pride for this country that basically is allowing you to prosper? Can you show some level of gratitude? And these people burning the United States of America flag, it's okay, we'll see ya, but they don't want to leave either. But I think what we're seeing here is a fundamental misunderstanding of our position. Because a lot of people are well, why aren't you just showing compassion on these people? Why don't you understand the plight of these immigrants? So let me clear that up so that any people that are listening to this that don't understand us will understand. And I will speak slowly so that you can understand it, okay? I are pro-immigration as long as it's legal. We are pro bringing and keeping the best and brightest minds from all over the world in this country and in this economy. We are anti people cheating and coming through the back door and cutting the line, okay? Because fundamentally, it is unjust, and we're not here for it, okay? We're justice-driven people. And additionally, we are anti-people in this country whom we have no information on, and we don't know what their intentions are in this country. So the same would be true in your own household. Would you invite someone into your own household, or better yet, would you just leave the doors open to your house for anyone and everyone to come in, whether or not you know them, whether or not you know their intentions? Do they want to help you and your family stay safe and prosper, or do they want to take from your family and potentially hurt or kill them? Do you not know? Well, guess what? If you don't know if somebody is like that, you would never welcome them into your home. Does that make sense? So let me go to the big takeaway on this one. I don't believe you that you hate it here. You're certainly acting like you hate it here and that America is terrible, but I don't believe you. You're clearly full of crap because you are still choosing to be here. You live in a country where when you burn their flag, they don't just, come out and shoot you or hang you. Now, in some of your home countries that you fled, that's precisely what they would do. Do you think people that have fled Iran and came through the southern border and they're now here from Iran, do you think they would get away in downtown Tehran with burning the Iranian flag? No, they would be killed on the spot. But you're still choosing to be here because you can do that, right? Without really any retribution. So here's the thing. If you hate this country, okay, no big deal. You just forfeit your right to benefit from it. Deal? I mean, this seems like a pretty easy thing. If you don't like it here, you don't have to be here, right? Remember me talking about after the election, people living in Oklahoma, I can't believe every county went red. This place is such a terrible place to live, blah, blah, all those different things. Okay, well, if you hate it here, why are you staying here? It's super easy to pick up and move in this country, right? If you hate it in Oklahoma, Colorado's just right over there. Go there and hang out with all those blue no matter who people. But again, all these people that are complaining right now, I don't believe you because you're still staying here. So that's a first quick hitter. The other quick hitters that we're going to be going over today. It's going to be a bevy of Trump stuff just to start. Trump signing an executive order to ban the federal government from funding gender transition surgeries and drugs for children experiencing gender dysphoria. Trump accompanying his first legislative victory, or accomplishing his first legislative victory of his second presidential term by signing the Laken Riley Act into law. Trump offering federal workers buyouts in order to shrink the federal government. The state of California dropping its charges against the two undercover pro-life journalists who exposed Planned Parenthood allegedly selling aborted baby parts. A 500-pound woman suing Lyft after her driver canceled her ride because she would not fit in his vehicle. Yes, that's a real thing that happened. And then Colombia's president backing down with a whimper after initially refusing to accept planes from America carrying Colombian criminal illegal aliens. But you need to take a big drink of water because we're about to get after it. All right, here we go. So big drink of water. Sorry. New camera setup and all that. Had a little bit of a pause, but I think we're all still recording here. Just making sure. All right, we're doing it live here. Doing it live. All right, we're just going to make it happen. Okay. Well, I guess I need to say this before I get into the MLK stuff. So sorry for this little pause here. I do want to make a brief comment about the plane and helicopter crash that happened in Washington, D.C. Again, everyone on board died. 64 people on the plane died. On the plane died and 3 people in the helicopter died. There's a lot of people that are making comments about this right now. There's still a lot of information that has not been confirmed. And so I'm going to save my commentary maybe until next week, until we can get a little bit more of the investigation, a little bit more information. But I did want to just kind of throw that out there. I am so heartbroken for those people, for the 67 souls that perished. It's just an absolutely horrible thing. If those people are in your community, like I know a lot of people that live in the areas that also listen to the show, do what you can to love on those people and show them the gospel. But we need to get into something pretty controversial today. As you know on the show, I am no stranger to controversy. I don't shy away from topics that make people feel icky or a little bit squeamish. I also have a tendency to go after sacred cows on this show, and I make no bones about it, and I'm not going to sacrifice. So there are people that see Andy Stanley as a sacred cow, okay, that he's somehow above criticism because of the size of his church or the size of his influence or because of who his daddy was, but I don't see it that way. I see him as a man who is fallible, and when he strays from anything that even resembles biblical doctrine or orthodoxy, I'm going to hit him on it, okay? But we've talked about him on the show. Why? Because it's absolutely necessary to do so, okay? I've also gone after in vitro fertilization on this show. So I've tried to inform you all about the horrific ethical and moral issues with that entire process. And a lot of people think that IVF is a sacred cow. You can't talk about it unless you be a horrible, awful, judgmental, terrible person, but we've talked about it on the show. Why? Because it's absolutely necessary to do so. I also went after man's best friend, or at least some people's man's best friends, with pit bulls, right? I've gone after pit bulls. You're apparently not allowed to talk about pit bulls because they're just animals, right? They're so cool looking, right? Why would you dare say something bad about them? If they maul someone to death, it's the owner's fault, right? It's not as if they were bred to do that exact thing, right? It couldn't have anything to do with the fact that they're essentially wild animals that shouldn't be legal to own, right? But we've talked about them on this show. Why? Because it's absolutely necessary to do so on and so on and so forth. On this show, as I've shown you guys over and over, we're going to go after stuff that we need to go after in order to make sure that people are informed and forewarned and equipped to be able to push back darkness. Okay, that's why we're here. So today, for your benefit, I'm going to go after perhaps one of the biggest sacred cows in all of Western public life, and that's Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, so buckle up. Don't presume that you know what I'm going to say before I say it. Allow me to elucidate my point fully, and then you can judge from there, okay? So during the 2024 campaign for president, Donald Trump on multiple occasions said that he would release the FBI files with information on JFK, RFK, and MLK. Now, these files allegedly contained information about the surveillance that was done on these men by the federal government and potentially the federal government's involvement in their assassinations, all that kind of stuff. So time will tell whether or not there's any smoking gun really as it pertains to JFK and RFK. But I remember that there were people that were at least somewhat confused about MLK being included here in this line of names because people apparently were not tripping over themselves to learn more about MLK. So for the most part, the story of Martin Luther King Jr. is considered at least societally settled, okay? So he was an incredible man that fought tooth and nail for civil rights in this country, case closed. Let's dedicate an entire day on the calendar as Americans to honor the memory of this great man. Let's erect an enormous statue in our nation's capital to celebrate the life and impact of Martin Luther King Jr. Well, as with anyone, and everyone really, which is going to be to my overall point, it's not quite that simple, okay? Now, for years, I have heard rumors about Martin Luther King Jr. and some of the things that he had done, but they were rumors that had not been substantiated. But the FBI released more files on Martin Luther King Jr. They haven't released everything that they have because there are some recordings and some different things that would even further some of the things that I'm about to read, but they haven't been released yet. Some of the stuff is just absolutely shocking. Some of it is absolutely disgusting. Some of it should be disqualifying for him, considering all of our new understandings about what could get someone canceled, right? We live in cancel culture. And so now we need to reckon with that. But here's my main point for bringing this up today. It's time for Christians and society writ large, frankly, to get real about Martin Luther King Jr. and just exactly the type of man that he was. Because here's the thing that I see, and it's not just every Martin Luther King Day, right? Churches and preachers present him as if he's a saint. Even in traditions that don't do saints, there's almost like this MLK worship thing. There are pastors that will constantly quote Martin Luther King Jr. They usually say Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. They make sure they sneak that in. They'll post quotes from their churches, Instagram accounts or their own personal Facebook account or all that with stuff about Martin Luther King Jr., celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. But there are three main problems with this. The first is his personal behavior, King's personal behavior. So right now I'm going to be reading specifically from a page, and I've got links to all this in the show notes if you want to check it out. But this is from some of the FBI files, and it goes to the personal behavior and conduct of Martin Luther King Jr. King's personal conduct. With the funds he had received from the Ford Foundation, King held the first of two workshops in Miami, Florida in February 1968 to train Negro ministers in urban leadership. One Negro minister in attendance later expressed his disgust with the behind-the-scenes drinking, fornication, and homosexuality that went on at the conference. Several Negro and white prostitutes were brought in from the Miami area, and all-night sex orgy was held with these prostitutes and some of the delegates in attendance. One room had a large table in it which was filled with whiskey. The two Negro prostitutes were paid $50 to put on a sex show for the entertainment of the guests. A variety of sex acts deviating from the normal were observed. And then we have previous sexual experiences. This activity is not new to King and his associates. In early January 1964, King engaged in another two-day drunken sex orgy in Washington, D.C. Many of those present engaged in sexual acts, natural as well as unnatural, for the entertainment of onlookers. When one of the females shied away from engaging in the unnatural act, King and other people present discussed how she was to be taught and initiated in this respect. Throughout the ensuing years and until this date, King had continued to carry on his sexual aberrations secretly while holding himself out in the public view as a moral leader of religious conviction. Okay? There was also an FBI memo released with some more details, so this has been known for a while. But on January 6th of 1964, apparently Martin Luther King Jr. participated in another orgy. So this time the FBI had previously bugged the room because, again, they were doing surveillance on the guy. And allegedly, another pastor in MLK's inner circle named Logan Curse can be heard raping a woman, okay? And Martin Luther King can be heard laughing throughout the rape. So additionally, the mic picked up Martin Luther King offering advice to Curse and encouraging him during the rape, which is, absolutely vile. So apparently the full audio tapes, photographs, and all the film footage that the FBI has corroborating this information is not set to be unsealed and released until 2027 per a 50-year court order back in 1977. So jury's still out on whether or not that will be released. But I also want to read something from the FBI files here that's talking about his kind of sexual peccadillies. So this is talking about King's mistress. It was learned in February 1968 from a very responsible Los Angeles individual in a position to know that King had been having an illicit love affair with the wife of a prominent Negro dentist in Los Angeles, California since 1962. He believes King fathered a baby girl born to this woman inasmuch as her husband is allegedly sterile. The child resembles King to a great degree, and King contributes to the support of this child. He calls this woman every Wednesday and frequently meets her in various cities throughout the country. The individual who reported this is himself a prominent Negro who is related by law to King's mistress. He advised that he showed King since 1960 and referred to him as a hypocrite. He also reported that King is having illicit love affairs with 3 other women, one of whom is Joan Baez, the nationally known folk singer. The prominent Negro who furnished the information said he was appalled that a man of King's low character could cause so much trouble for both Negroes and the government. As can be seen from the above, it is a fact that King not only regularly indulges in adulterous acts, but enjoys the abnormal by engaging in group sexual orgies. Okay, so there's a lot here, and maybe you don't believe in all this and all that, but obviously his personal behavior is something that we should look at. The second thing that is problematic about Christians in the West just blindly worshiping this guy is his politics and his worldview. Okay, so the FBI investigators alleged the following about Martin Luther King: that he was surrounded by advisors with strong links to the Communist Party in the United States, that his public statements and public speeches were always subject to approval by the alleged communist sympathizers. So he would check with them before he would deliver one of his sermons or public speeches. Also, that he was a secret supporter of communism. Some people even called him, or were quoted as calling him, a wholehearted Marxist. And also his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, set up a tax dodge to raise funds for its activities, okay? But here's the thing, even with this claim and the previous claim. I can already hear some of you saying this, so you can save me the emails. But hey, Kyle, this was collected by the FBI. Don't you think they would make up lies to make him look bad? Don't you think that some white FBI agents, that they were racist and they had it out to make Martin Luther King look horrible? So here's my response to those kinds of comments. Maybe you're right. Maybe all of this is just a decades-long smear campaign by evil, racist white men that worked at the FBI against the biggest name in the civil rights movement here in the United States, because they just had an axe to grind, because they just wanted black people held down and they were white supremacists. Maybe. But everything that I just read from the FBI reports and some of the different things that have been released have been publicly corroborated by Martin Luther King's closest friend. So there was a guy named Ralph Abernathy. He wrote a book in the late 1980s called, the early 1980s, I believe. It was called "And the Walls Came Tumbling Down," and it detailed much of what I read from the FBI files above, okay, or earlier. So guys, at a minimum, he cheated on his spouse multiple times with multiple women. That in and of itself is enough to disqualify him as a minister, right? You have to be a husband of one wife, faithful in marriage. We see that in 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:6. But allegedly, he fathered a child out of wedlock, at least one. He participated in orgies. He participated in orgies that included homosexual sex, and he participated in prostitution, and he participated in rape. Again, these are allegations, and as I've told you here on the show, we have to adjudicate these things and make sure that we are doing the exact right thing and making sure that people can speak for themselves. But there's a lot of evidence showing that Martin Luther King was just not a very good guy. But let's just say everything I read up to this point was not true, okay? Let's say all those were smear campaigns, and there was some way for us to literally say and find out that no, he actually didn't cheat on his spouse. He didn't father a baby out of wedlock. He didn't participate in orgies, homosexual or heterosexual, that he didn't participate in prostitution, that he didn't even participate in rape. Let's say that. A third reason that I think Christians should really get real about Martin Luther King Jr. is because of his rejection of core Christian doctrines. So we have writings from Martin Luther King Jr., when he was an adult, right? It wasn't like when he was a child. And in them, he rejects all of the following: the divinity of Christ, the virgin birth, the resurrection, the bodily resurrection of Christ, the existence of hell, and the second coming of Christ. Let me just read that again. Martin Luther King Jr., in his own writings, he went against and rejected the following: the divinity of Christ, the virgin birth, the resurrection, the existence of hell, and the second coming of Christ. So I actually want to read from an article that Virgil Walker wrote. Virgil's been on the show before. He wrote this on January the 20th. So this is from his article here. I'll put it in the show notes. In his paper on the humanity and divinity of Jesus, King wrote this: "The orthodox attempt to explain the divinity of Jesus in terms of an inherent metaphysical substance within him seems to me quite inadequate. To say that Christ is divine in an ontological sense is actually harmful and detrimental, so that the orthodox view of the divinity of Christ is, in my mind, quite readily denied." King's denial of Christ's divinity naturally extended to other foundational doctrines, including the resurrection. This is again a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. here. "This doctrine, the resurrection, upon which the Easter faith rests, symbolizes the ultimate Christian conviction that Christ conquered death. From a literary, historical, and philosophical point of view, this doctrine raises many questions. In fact, the external evidence for the authenticity of this doctrine is found wanting." Back to the article here. King also dismissed the virgin birth, the second coming of Christ, and the existence of a literal hell. Such theological positions directly conflict with core Christian beliefs as underscored by the Apostle Paul. So this is 1 Corinthians 15, verses 12 through 14. "Now, if Christ is proclaimed as raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? But if there is no resurrection of the dead, then even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain." By rejecting those doctrines, King's theological framework departs significantly from the faith he publicly represented, challenging the integrity of his spiritual leadership. So guys, given this evidence, the evidence being his own words, right, you can easily come to the conclusion that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was very likely not even a Christian. Again, this guy is held up as a paragon of Christian virtue and morality, but again, if we're judging fruit here, can we say that he has any if he rejects those core level beliefs? Right? I mean, he was not a believer in the actual gospel, but man, Martin Luther King Jr. was a huge fan of the social gospel. So I want to go back to Virgil's article here. Walter Rauschenbusch, his social gospel profoundly influenced King's theology, emphasizing transformation of society over personal salvation. This reinterpretation of Christianity shifted the focus from the redemptive message of Christ's death and resurrection to economic redistribution and social justice. King's calls for a warless world and a better distribution of wealth clearly reflects this influence. In a letter to Coretta Scott King, he wrote, "Let us continue to hope, work, and pray that in the future we will live to see a warless world, a better distribution of wealth, and a brotherhood that transcends race or color. That is the gospel that I preach to the world." Okay? So again, guys, the three main problems that I've brought up with Martin Luther King Jr. is number one, his personal behavior. Number two, his politics and worldview. And number three, his rejection of core Christian doctrines. And here's the craziest thing about everything that I just brought to you. I bet that the overwhelming majority of you in my audience and the people in existence in the world, frankly, today, didn't know almost anything about the information that I just said. Again, it's like one of the best kept public secrets that all this information is out there about Martin Luther King Jr., and yet no one's reckoned with it. You have some random people in the blogosphere that are posting stuff here and there that are saying, hey, I think this is a concerning thing. And it's ultimately because people are terrified to go at him because he is a sacred cow. Oh, you can't say anything bad about the guy or you're a racist bigot, right? But here's the ultimate point, guys. We need to hold him, Martin Luther King Jr., in the same tension that we do anyone from history. I'm not advocating for canceling Martin Luther King Jr. I am advocating that we treat him like anybody else from the past that isn't here to defend themselves. We have to stop blindly celebrating him as if he were some sinless man. Again, churches all over the planet, people that I love, respect, and follow, they just fawn over Martin Luther King and some of the good things that he said, and he certainly has said some good things. But again, we have to be able to hold him in this tension. And so specifically, again, the churches that are quoting Martin Luther King Jr. during sermons and all this and posting the Martin Luther King Jr. quotes, like, you really got to consider stopping doing that, or at least presenting it with some sort of qualification that, man, he was a pretty bad dude. He did amazing things in the civil rights movement, but he wasn't a good person, right? But we treat him as if he was. And guys, if that offends you, right, just ask yourself, given what we know about his behavior, his worldview, and him probably not even being a Christian, would you fill up your sermons and Instagram feeds with a bunch of quotes from other people that participated in sins like he did or potentially allegedly did and believed what he did about politics and that weren't Christians? Like, why does Martin Luther King Jr. get some magical pass to our criticism? Because again, if you loaded up your sermon with quotes from Nietzsche or, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of any other prominent, like Gandhi or people that just weren't Christians, they didn't have political worldviews that were downstream of a biblical, gospel-centered ethic, if they had participated in these potentially horrifically terrible sins against other image bearers of God, would you post quotes from that person on your Instagram page? Right? Again, that doesn't mean that you just disregard everything that the person has ever done. But again, we have to hold it in tension. And Martin Luther King Jr. should be held in the same tension as someone like Thomas Jefferson. Okay? Because both men allegedly, so I don't get sued, allegedly cheated on their spouses, participated in rapes, and fathered children out of wedlock. In addition to other unique sins, like Jefferson being a slave owner and an abuser, and Martin Luther King potentially participating in drunken gay orgies, right? They both kind of had their own flavors. But we hold Thomas Jefferson, and I advocate that we hold Thomas Jefferson in tension because he gave us the Declaration of Independence. He's one of our founding fathers. He's one of the greatest Americans, and most of us would not be, I wouldn't be here recording this right now without a guy like Thomas Jefferson, okay? But he was a slave owner, and he raped his slaves and fathered children by them. So if we can say that that is immoral, and that is evil, and that is wicked, but these other things he did was good, that he was a flawed, sinful man. He took a freaking, butcher's knife to the Bible and created his own because he just wasn't comfortable with all like the miracles and all the other stuff in the Bible. If we can call all that wicked, we can still call the things that he did that were good, good. And so that's what I want us to do today. I'm not here for canceling Martin Luther King Jr. He's got an entire day on the United States calendar dedicated to his memory, his life, and his work. Now, I may disagree with that fundamentally because he's basically the only person that has that, but why can't we hold him in tension like everybody else? If you want to quote him, that's fine, but we need to be very, very serious about the people that we're following and the people that we are pointing, the people that follow us, to. If you're going to point someone to anyone, point them to Jesus. How many times on the show have I talked about Jordan Peterson and how much I love and respect his content and, how much I appreciate spending time with him in person and all that kind of stuff. But the guy's not a Christian. And if the guy, if it were to be revealed that he's done some horrible things to other image bearers of God, I would denounce him for that, for being immoral and wicked. I wouldn't say, hey, let's cancel him. Let's get rid of the, 12 rules for life. Let's, burn them, in the middle of the streets. But again, Martin Luther King was a man. He was born into sin. And then he chose to sin throughout his entire life. My fervent hope is that he was actually a Christian, that he did believe in Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross for the propitiation of his personal sin debt, even though the evidence suggests that he didn't believe in the core doctrines that would even lead someone to put their faith in a Christ of any kind, right? But I hope he did. I hope he wasn't just a man that accomplished things in this world, but that he is enjoying spending time in the presence of Christ in the afterlife. But it's impossible to know. Again, we just need to hold him in tension. Hey guys, real quick. Do you remember during the pandemic when you basically couldn't get anything shipped to your house? All this manufacturing that was supposed to be taking place in America had been shipped overseas and you just didn't notice it. And I remember a bunch of companies saying, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we bring manufacturing back to America, and almost none of them followed through on that promise. But for me and for all of us here at Undaunted.Life, I wanted to make sure that I partnered with an American company that actually did want to prioritize American workers, their families, their communities, and a company that would keep their word. And that's why I want to remind you that we are partnered with Origin. Origin is an apparel company based in Maine, and what do they make? They make the best jiu-jitsu gis on the planet and the only jiu-jitsu gis that are made completely in America. They also make jeans. Yes, they have stretchy jeans. They also have work jeans and bootcut jeans for you guys as well. They make amazing hunting gear. And here's the thing. I know you guys like some other hunting brands, but those companies are American companies that use overseas labor to increase their profit margins on their gear, not to help you or Americans out. They also offer handmade leather boots. That does include steel toe boots and mock toe boots. And they also make workout clothes and everyday pants and shirts and almost indestructible hoodies. And they're launching new apparel all the time. Guys, if you haven't already tried Origin stuff, you need to check them out and support a company that supports Americans. Try Origin out today by going to www.originusa.com. That's originusa.com. Use the promo code UNDAUNTED to get 10% off your order. Again, that's originusa.com. Promo code UNDAUNTED to get 10% off your order. All right, guys, let's get into the quick hitters here. We have a trio of Trump-related stories to start out the quick hitters. So the first one, Trump signing an executive order to ban the federal government from funding gender transition surgeries and drugs for children experiencing gender dysphoria. So this is according to the Daily Wire on January the 29th. On Tuesday, Trump signed an order committing that the United States will not fund or support the so-called transition of a child from one sex to another, and it will rigorously enforce all laws that prohibit or limit these destructive and life-altering procedures. This dangerous trend will be a stain on our nation's history, and it must end, the order stated. So a lot of things that Trump is doing, especially in his first couple of weeks, is just restoring sanity, okay? At no point should this have ever been considered, right? So when he said that this is a stain on our nation's history, I think there will be historians that are going to be writing about the United States of America in this period in the United States culture long after we're gone. They're going to be like, what in the hell were these people doing? Wait, so you're telling me they were cutting the healthy breast tissue off of, healthy bodily little girls that had mental problems? Wait a minute, they had autistic boys that, thought they were the opposite gender, and they just gave them sterilizing hormones to delay their puberty so that they could quote unquote transition to something which is not even possible. It's going to be absolute insanity as we look back on this. But, sanity is being restored right now. So I'll go to my big takeaway. This is great, but it needs to be followed up with two things. Number one, the Republicans need to pass federal legislation banning this for children and adults. And number two, the hospitals and doctors that have participated in this butchery for profit need to be ruined for this. So back to the first one. This is just an executive order. As with any executive order, it's great for a headline, but if Kamala Harris or some other random Democrat actually wins in 2028, guess what? They just, on the first day, with the power of the pen, reverse this, okay? The Republicans have the House and the Senate and the White House right now. Pass federal legislation banning this for children, but also for adults. Because here's the thing. We're focusing on the kids, right, which is the most insane because they can't consent, right? They can't consent to any of the things that are done to them. But why in the world are we allowing adults to do this? Because people are putting this in the same category as tattoos or piercings or body alterations of some kind. That's not what this is, right? We're cutting off people's genitalia and we're allowing insurance to pay for it. Like, I'm sorry, but that just needs to be banned across the board. This is butchery. This is nonsense. This, goes beyond the Hippocratic Oath. This violates the Hippocratic Oath. It shouldn't be done. And again, the second thing, the hospitals and doctors that have participated in this, and Matt Walsh made this point very, very fervently on his show last week. But these people think that they can just kind of fade into the background, that they participated in the profit off of these procedures and all the follow-ups in the surgeries and different things like that. And if it gets banned, they're just going to go back to doing what they were doing before. That shouldn't be how this works. Because if you profit off the butchery of children, I'm sorry, you don't just get a pass. Now, we don't live in a country where we're going to probably be able to imprison those people, but their corporate lives, their financial lives as it pertains to this should be ruined because of what they've done. There has to be a consequence for these people. And the consequence can't be, oh, it looks like here on your resume, you worked for a children's hospital that butchered children. Okay, we're not going to consider you for this job. It has to go further. All right, next quick hitter here. This is Trump accomplishing his first legislative victory of his second presidential term by signing the Laken Riley Act into law. This is according to Fox News on January the 29th. President Donald Trump signed the Laken Riley Act into law on Wednesday, marking the first piece of legislation to become law in his second administration. This horrific atrocity should never have been allowed to happen, Trump told reporters ahead of signing the legislation. And as president, I'm fighting every single day to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. The measure, which advanced through the House and Senate in January, directs Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's ICE, to detain illegal immigrants arrested or charged with theft-related crimes or those accused of assaulting a police officer. Okay? So again, just to remind you of this horrible, brutal murder, Laken Riley, who was a 20-year-old, I believe, nursing student at the University of Georgia, was murdered by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela, Jose Ibarra, and, beat her to death with a rock. Just an absolutely horrible, terrible thing. She should be alive today because Jose Ibarra should have never been in this country. So big takeaway here. Just like the one I just previously talked about. This is great, but it needs to be followed up by two things. Number one, most violent illegal immigrants, the most violent ones, need to go to Guantanamo Bay. And number two, we should consider setting up a penal colony. Okay? So go back to Guantanamo Bay. It was released that we have something in the neighborhood, I think it was like 20,000 or 30,000, I can't remember what, beds that are available in Guantanamo Bay. Because you don't want to just ship some of the worst people back to their home countries if those home countries haven't solidified a way to keep those people from coming right back up and right back through our southern border, okay? And so we don't want them to come back. They're too much of a threat. And so if you send them to Guantanamo Bay, right, some of the most violent illegal immigrants that have done the most brutal crimes, then they won't have a chance to come back here and do those crimes again. And the second thing, Trump actually floated this idea, and I love the idea, setting up a penal colony outside the United States. Because penal colonies were something that are still practiced today, but something that the U.S. and other Western countries have done throughout their history. One thing that this does, without getting into all the details, it avoids some of the tax burden to U.S. citizens. Because you're basically paying other countries to run a facility that you're going to pay for, but it's going to be ran by some of the people that are there in that country, so it's an economic boon for them, and there's going to be money that's going to be made by individuals in that country, and so it'll ultimately be cheaper on the U.S. taxpayer to not house those people in federal prisons here in the United States. So I'm totally pro those things. I hope Trump can actually pull them off. All right, last Trump one here. Trump offering federal workers buyouts in order to shrink the federal government. This is according to ABC News on January the 28th. The Trump administration announced Tuesday that it is offering buyouts to all federal employees who opt to leave their jobs by next week, an unprecedented move to shrink the U.S. government at breakneck speed. A memo from the Office of Personnel Management, the government's human resources agency, also said it would begin subjecting all federal employees to enhanced standards of suitability and conduct, and ominously warned of future downsizing. The email sent to millions of employees said those who leave their posts voluntarily will receive about 8 months of salary, but they have to choose to do so by February the 6th. So we're talking about literally right around the corner here. So like the day you guys, most of you guys are listening to this. So basically Trump said, if you don't want to quit, we will accept that. Or sorry, if you do want to quit, if you'd like to quit, we accept that. Here's an 8-month severance package. Now I've only been fired once in my life, but I didn't get an 8-month severance package. Okay. But then also, if you don't want to quit, you have to show up to work. But we also might get rid of your position or your department anyway. So you've got a decision to make. For a lot of these lifetime bureaucrats or people that have just been suckling off of the federal government teat for all this time, basically not doing any meaningful work, they're having to think to themselves, man, do I need to go to the private sector? Do I need to try to shift somewhere else because I may not have a job? But again, it's not like it's like, all right, you're all done here. Friday's your last day, no severance. You get it. You get an 8-month severance package. Like I heard from someone recently, there was someone that they know that works for the federal government making $95,000 a year. They're essentially resetting passwords. So, when you're trying to log in somewhere, you can't remember your password and you have to go to, customer service and you have to reset the thing and blah, 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 and do all that. That's what this person does for a living. They make almost 6 figures. Okay. So I would say for most of these guys, that's a hell of a deal. You get 8 months of severance. You get technically 8 months to figure out what you're going to do with your career while you're still getting paid by the U.S. taxpayer. Like, that's a hell of a deal. Here's my big takeaway on this. And this just kind of wraps up the first 3 quick hitters concerning Trump. Trump is not playing around this time, and I am here for it. Again, my head is spinning because every time I write one of these episodes and I write my quick hitters and all that, there's like 4 more things that the Trump administration does. Like just in the last 24 hours, we're basically strong arming and taking back the Panama Canal. He announced that he wants to get rid of the Department of Education, basically sending education back to the states. It's so hard to wrap my head around all the things that he's doing. But again, a lot of these are executive actions. They need to be put into law in order for them to be put into practice in the long term, but I am here for it. All right, next quick hitter here. The state of California dropping its charges against the 2 undercover pro-life journalists who exposed Planned Parenthood allegedly selling aborted baby parts. So this is according to Live Action. A court battle lasting nearly a decade has come to an end for 2 pro-life undercover journalists who exposed Planned Parenthood's alleged fetal body part trafficking scandal. David Daleiden, founder of the Center of Medical Progress, and journalist Sandra Merritt announced on Monday that the criminal cases against them have ended, with the California Attorney General's office agreeing to a plea deal that includes no prison time or fines for the journalists. CMP's videos showed Planned Parenthood executives haggling with companies like STEM Express over the prices of organs and tissues taken from the preborn children its abortionists had killed. Some of those children were potentially born alive before their hearts were harvested. After 9 years of unprecedented political persecution, putting an end to the lawfare launched by Kamala Harris is a huge victory for my investigative reporting and for the public's right to know the truth about Planned Parenthood's sale of aborted baby parts. Now we must all get to work by protecting families and infants from the criminal abortion industrial complex, Daleiden said to Live Action News. Okay, so again, if you weren't aware of this, Kamala Harris was the GA in California and brought this case against these 2 individuals. Some of you remember these videos I talked about on the show whenever they came out. But you have Planned Parenthood executives and employees that are basically casually talking about the amount of money. One lady was like, I want to buy a Lamborghini with the money that they were making off of aborted baby parts. And some of these children were killed by the process of them harvesting an organ. So a baby would be alive, but then they're cutting its heart out and killing it so that they can sell the intact heart. Okay. In both, in this case, so California and Kamala Harris, they were more concerned about hurting the pro-abortion cause by bringing these charges than the almost definite reality that Planned Parenthood is further profiting off of the babies that they murder. Again, at all costs, because California is just a hellscape when it comes to abortion, but at all costs, they had to protect the abortion industry in their state. And so, as opposed to looking at this and being like, oh my gosh, Planned Parenthood is literally profiting off of the sale of baby parts. Like, this is so violative of so many laws, but it's also deeply immoral. California's like, no, that's going to hurt us. We're super pro-abortion. Actually, we already knew that Planned Parenthood was doing this, so we're just going to crush the journalists for doing something that they legally were allowed to do. So my big takeaway here, this really, guys, is another victory lap for the Donald Trump is the most pro-life president ever crowd. Okay? Because we can essentially guarantee, we don't know this, but we can guarantee almost that this plea deal would not have been reached if Kamala Harris were in the White House. Because again, Kamala Harris was the AG, I think I said GA earlier, but she was the AG at the time and brought this case against these 2 pro-life journalists. So you're telling me that if she got into office and was at the top of the most pro-abortion administration in the history of the United States, that all of a sudden this would have been dropped, that this plea deal, which had no fines and no prison time, would have been reached? Like, I don't see that at all. And so, again, to all of you pro-lifers, supposed pro-lifers that just couldn't vote for Donald Trump because he wasn't signaling that he was going to be pro-life enough for you during the election cycle, I want you to look at the things that are happening now and reconsider your position. All right, next quick hitter here. A 500-pound woman suing Lyft after her driver canceled her ride because she would not fit in his vehicle. We live in the dumbest, fattest time in human history. This is according to People magazine on January 29th. A Detroit rapper has filed a lawsuit against Lyft, alleging that one of its drivers canceled her ride due to her weight. Dejua Blanding, we'll just call her Blanding, sued the rideshare company after the driver, identified as John Doe, in Michigan Circuit Court for Wayne County on Monday, January the 27th. Blanding, whose stage name is Dank DeMoss, alleged that on January 18th, she contacted Lyft looking for transportation from her home to her cousin's house for a football game watch party. Doe arrived at Blanding's home around 10 or 15 minutes later. However, when she went to get inside of Doe's vehicle, he allegedly refused to let her in, court documents obtained by People on Tuesday the 28th allege. Okay, so she took video of this interaction. So this is one of those moments where she takes video of an interaction that makes her look absolutely terrible, but she posted online because she thinks she's in the moral correct position. This guy was very polite, okay? In the video, he mentions that he can't do the ride because he's afraid about his tires or something like that. So this guy was trying to say everything in a very polite way, except for, ma'am, you're outrageously enormous, and I don't want your disgusting body inside of my car. Ma'am, you're so big that even if you did fit in the car, you wouldn't be able to get the seatbelt on, which is illegal. Ma'am, this isn't a tank. So if you get in this, it could really damage my vehicle, and it's not worth the $20 I'm going to make off this ride. He did everything except saying the thing that he needed to say, right? And so quick note on this woman. Again, she reportedly weighs just under 500 pounds. 500 pounds. Like, do you realize what it takes to be that fat? Because she looks to be around 5'5", maybe 5'4", okay? In order to be that big, someone kind of did the math online. They said you would have to eat roughly 8,000 calories a day to grow to that size. 8,000 calories a day. Like, dude, I eat a lot, right? My lunch, which I'm going to have here in a second, I don't know if you just heard my stomach growl. I'm going to eat a pound of ground beef as the start to my lunch. Then I'll have some cheese, and I'll have some bananas. I'll have some of these, protein oat peanut butter balls that I make. Like, I don't know that I've ever consumed 8,000 calories in a day. And I've had some serious dessert days, if you know what I'm talking about. Super Bowl coming up. I plan on literally sitting in a chair and eating like an entire pie and like half a bowl of my wife's banana pudding, right? But 8,000 calories to get to that position? Let's go back to the People magazine article real quick. Her attorney, John Marco, tells People under the law, refusing someone transportation due to their weight is no different than refusing someone transportation based on their race or religion. Discrimination of any kind should never be tolerated in our society. So he's talking about protected classes here. Okay, he's talking about a protected class. But let me just break the news to this attorney, which this should just basically get thrown out of court. It should be laughed out of court. Being fat is not a protected class. Okay, so he mentions race. If someone refuses to give me a Lyft ride because I'm white, that is racist, and that is protected because I can't help it, right? Or my nation of origin. If they're like, if I'm in another country and they're like, that would only apply here. But if they're like, you're an American and I only take, foreigners or illegals. Okay, well, that's protected as well. You can't discriminate on me based on my country of origin. You can't discriminate me based on my race. She didn't end up fat on accident. Like, she wasn't born 500 pounds. She is a literal walking or shuffling example of somebody that is a lifetime of bad decision-making and lack of discipline. That's not a protected class. I have no idea how this wasn't just summarily thrown out of court to begin with. So let's go to my big takeaway here, no pun intended. She only has one person that she should be mad at in this situation, and that's obviously herself. Her slovenly, lazy, slothful, fat self. And we have to start speaking truth to these types of individuals, because for someone to get that big, that means she's either a raving narcissist that listens to no one, and or the people that are surrounding her in her life don't actually love her. They don't actually care for her. Because to allow someone that you love to get to that size, like, do you see people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that weigh 500 pounds? You don't, because they're all dead. They die of heart attacks, heart disease, other cancers that are caused by their lack of discipline in their food intake. So she should be mad in this situation, but it shouldn't be at that Lyft driver. All right, last quick hitter here. Colombia's president backing down with a whimper after initially refusing to accept planes from America carrying Colombian criminal illegal aliens. So this is according to the Daily Wire on January the 26th. Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who is a former Marxist terrorist, reversed course on Sunday after he blocked 2 U.S. flights from landing in the country that were carrying criminal illegal aliens from the country. The government of Colombia, under the direction of President Gustavo Petro, has arranged the presidential plane to facilitate the dignified return of the compatriots who were going to arrive in the country today in the morning, coming from deportation flights, Petro's office said in a statement. This measure responds to the government's commitment to guarantee decent conditions. In no way have Colombians, as patriots and subjects of rights, have not been and will be banished from Colombian territory. The reversal by Petro came just several minutes after Trump announced a series of tough measures against the country for refusing the flights, including emergency 25% tariffs on all goods coming into the United States. In 1 week, the 25% tariffs will be raised to 50%, a travel ban and immediate visa revocations on the Colombian government officials and all allies and supporters, visa sanctions on all party members, family members, and supporters of the Colombian government, enhanced customs and border protection inspections of all Colombian nationals and cargo on national security grounds, and IEEPA Treasury, banking, and financial sanctions to be fully imposed. Trump said that the measures were only the beginning and that the U.S. will not allow the Colombian government to violate its legal obligations with regard to the acceptance of the return of the criminals they forced into the United States. So right to my big takeaway on this one. As it pertains to foreign aid and the return of criminal illegal aliens to their countries of origin, the United States holds all the cards. In this particular interaction, the reason why the Colombian leader backed down so quickly is because they hold no cards. Because people talk about how we import coffee and flowers and different things from that country. The United States of America, Americans, would not even notice the increase in their price of flowers and coffee because of this. But if we put these tariffs into place, if they hadn't backed down, it would have absolutely obliterated the Colombian economy. It would have been absolutely awful for them. But specifically when we get into discussions of foreign aid, if your country cannot exist without federal aid provided against the will of the U.S. taxpayer to you, then you're technically not a country. I know Matt Walsh was destroyed for this last week because he basically said that all these countries that depend on us for aid should just basically be conquered by other countries. But the reality is you can't really go that far. You can't really be that pedantic about it and literal about it. We do that. We give foreign aid to other countries so that China won't. So a lot of people talked about China's Belt and Road Initiative. And look, if we're not giving money to these South American and Southeast Asian and African countries, then China will come in, and we don't want China having any more influence around the globe or any more allies around the globe. So I get why we still give foreign aid. But here's the thing. If you're a country like the Sudan or any of these countries that are getting aid from us, and if you couldn't survive as a country without our aid, you just need to be real about the fact that you don't actually have a country. And if we give you money, you must do two things at a minimum. The first is do exactly what we tell you to do. And number two, show gratitude for our gifts. Right? Remember me earlier talking about these people stomping and burning the American flag, showing absolutely no gratitude to the country that they are taking from? It's absolutely absurd. So if you're in one of these countries, you have to show gratitude. One of the ways that you do that is back to the first one, do exactly what we tell you to do. Okay? So if I work for XYZ Corporation and my boss, right, the person that owns the company, gives me money to work there, I have to do what they tell me to do, right? And everything that's short of, doing something that's illegal or immoral, right? But as it pertains to my job, like I have to do what they tell me to do or else I cease to work there. Like that's the arrangement we have. I trade my time and talent for your money, right? That's what we do. So if we give you money in this country, we give our money to you, do exactly what we tell you to do, and show gratitude for our gifts. And then as it pertains to the return of criminal illegal aliens, again, our tariffs would have bankrupted that country. It would have happened in short order. And the slight inconvenience to us would not compare to how crushing our tariffs would be to their entire economy. But essentially what Trump is setting up with all these other countries that have been taking advantage of us or actively harming us, for the last several decades is it's kind of FAFO at this point. It's like, if you want to FAFO, you can, but I'd suggest you not do that. He's currently doing that over the past weekend whenever he announced tariffs on Canada and Mexico, specifically because the amount of illegal immigration they allow to filter through their countries into ours. Yes, Canada does that as well on our northern border. It's not nearly as bad as the southern border, but it is bad. It's fairly porous on the northern side of our country as well. And so he's like, yeah, do this or else. And they kind of flex and posture and do stuff like that, but then they acquiesce almost immediately because we hold the cards. We are the A side. Like, I remember, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but go back to when Floyd Mayweather fought Conor McGregor. There were some concessions that the McGregor team wanted and different things like that. But Floyd, I'm not a Floyd Mayweather fan by any stretch of the imagination. At one point he goes, hey, what makes you guys think you're the A-side of these negotiations? Like, yeah, you were the biggest star in the history of MMA, which even you pale in comparison to the influence and the numbers that I've done in my career as a boxer. So all these things that you're wanting, it's like, shoo, go away. Thank you for your feedback. We'll take it into consideration, but you have no cards here. The same is true. I don't negotiate with James and Eli, my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old. You know why? Because I'm their parent. Like, I've literally said this to my 4-year-old. I was like, what makes you think you have any rights in this? What makes you think that this is a negotiation? Like, while you're living in this house, eating my food and, enjoying the HVAC paid for by mine and your mom's, money, like, you don't get to have, you can have an opinion, but you don't get to dictate terms. So for a lot of these countries, there's no give and take. It's only give. And so when we ask of something, you better do it. All right, guys, and that'll do it for today. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. Our mission at Undaunted.Life is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Got a link to our donation page. Again, guys, if you want to help support us to get this out to more guys around the globe so that we can equip them to push back darkness, make sure you go there. It's Undaunted.Life/donate. Also, our Dominion program. That's our coaching program that we set up interviews for a couple of times a year. If you want to join the if you want to join the wait list, you can go there on Undaunted.Life/Dominion. If you want to get your tickets to the Church 1122 Men's Conference, it is there in the show notes as well. And then also all the links to the stuff that I referred to in the Martin Luther King FBI files section, and the quick hitters is right there in the show notes as well. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.